Here is the rewritten story, with the currency, setting, and details Americanized. My daughter said that I wasn't expected at the wedding. That's how everyone decided. Sorry. Dad, I calmly answered. I understand. And froze the deposit at Chase Bank, which they were counting on so much. And then something happened that I still can't comprehend. I'll tell you everything in order. But first, have a huge thank you to everyone who supports us. This is really important. If you like our stories, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you are watching from. And now, to the point. I have never been one to beg for thanks. Not in my rules. I was brought up in that old school. When pride eats into the bones along with the calluses on the palms, a word is stronger than concrete. And a last name means something in the neighborhood. For almost 40 years, I toiled at construction sites, pouring foundations in January, frosts, assembling frames in July, sweltering heat, and knew every screw and dowel like a native. But the most important thing I built in my life isn't houses. It's Marina, my daughter. She was born with the eyes of my late wife, and my stubbornness to boot. When Galina died, Marinka was only 12. I raised her alone. Every broken key, every bad grade in the diary, every broken girl's heart. I was there. Not an ideal father. Not one of those who coddle, but reliable as a rock. He saved up enough of his pension to live in peace and help his family. He didn't chase expensive cars, didn't travel abroad, didn't gamble. He was happy watching how Marina and Yegor, my grandson, were settling into life. Yegor is a real guy. Smart, well-mannered, respectful, a rarity these days. I helped him with his first car, vouched for his college loan, even taught him how to work with drywall when he and his friends decided to convert the basement into a studio. He always called me Grandpa with a sly smile, as if I was his personal secret that he was proud of. These trifles made everything else seem trivial. They dulled the pain of losing Galina a little. When Yegor announced his engagement last fall, I started thinking about the future in a new way. I didn't want to just give them a microwave or slip an envelope to the DJ. I wanted to do something substantial. I went to a notary and opened a targeted deposit at Chase Bank. It would be enough for a down payment on an apartment and a proper honeymoon, the kind you get when you're young, when you still believe that the world owes you something good. I didn't tell anyone, neither Marina nor Yegor. I wanted it to be a surprise. A gesture that would say, "Your family believes in you," because I thought we were a family. Not ideal, but strong, connected by years, work, and a common history. I remember that morning. I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking strong tea without sugar, when Marina called. Her voice was tense, polite in such a rude way. She always talks like that when she's about to say something nasty, knowing in advance that it will hurt. "Dad," she began, "we need to talk about the wedding." I smiled, thinking she wanted to ask me to give a toast or help pick out a restaurant. Of course. "Daughter, what is it?" A long, awkward pause. Then she cleared her throat. "We decided it would probably be better if you didn't come." At first, I thought I misheard. "I'm not coming where to the wedding. Only the bride's parents will be there. Her relatives. They think it will be easier, less stressful. You know how it is sometimes." I stared at the wall above the sink. There was a small photograph of 6-year-old Yegor holding a hammer next to the crooked plywood bird feeder we had made together. I didn't even feel the mug in my hand. "Got it," I said. That was the whole conversation. I didn't argue, didn't clarify. Just hung up and sat in silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the beating of his own heart in his ears. After lunch, I went into my office, opened the cabinet, took out the documents on the deposit, leafed through the pages, then called the bank and ordered them to freeze the account. No explanations. Only orders. There were no tears. I didn't rage. I just did what I always did. I always made the necessary adjustments. If they don't need me at the wedding, then they don't need my money for their future. It's simple. At least that's what I told myself. In reality, it turned out to be more complicated. It was like a knife in the back with a smile. I toiled for decades, took on the hardest jobs so that my daughter and grandson would never experience the emptiness I knew as a child. And in one phone call, I understood my place. Not a member of the family, but furniture, useful as long as it's comfortable. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the veranda, wrapped in an old blanket, watching the stars go out one by one. The air was cold, my bones ached, but I sat anyway because I knew something had changed. Something that could not be fixed or rebuilt. And for the first time in many years, I wasn't sure I wanted to try. I didn't tell anyone about Marina's call. Not my friends from the construction site. Not my old group of friends with whom I still gather for tea once a month. And certainly not my neighbors, who asked about the wedding every time we met. Let them chatter. Let them think that I'll be in the front row, smiling like a proud grandfather. Let them imagine me choosing a suit, booking a hotel, rehearsing a toast. I nodded politely and didn't give anything away. What can you say? That my own daughter had crossed me off the guest list for her grandson's wedding, as if I were some disgraceful alcoholic relative, that I had become an extra in a play I had written from the start. No, saying it out loud meant making it real, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. The days dragged on, and each one added to the weight of her words. You know how it happens sometimes. What does that even mean? That I'm too straightforward? Too honest? That I can't pretend to like every decision they make? I never raised my voice at Yegor. Never criticized his fiancée. Even when Marina whispered complaints about her overbearing parents and ostentatious manners. When Yegor dropped out of graduate school for a job with a pittance, I supported him. Came, helped, and kept quiet. But constancy, apparently, has gone out of fashion. It's easier to push away a person who doesn't fit into your tidy life. Someone who reminds you of times you want to forget. I thought about calling her, rehearsing the conversation dozens of times. In some versions, I said everything to her face. In others, I played an offended father trying to understand. But in each version, I heard her calm, condescending tone, as if she were an adult, and I was a capricious old man who didn't know what was what. I couldn't digest it. Kept quiet, concentrated on work, not for money. With my hands, I repaired the terrace, replaced the gutters, re-equipped the garage. Anything, just so as not to sit idle and not to poison myself with disappointment. When the wedding week arrived, it felt like a change in the weather. The house became colder. Although the sun was shining, the silence became heavier, thicker. The day before the ceremony, Marina posted a photo on Facebook of herself in a blue dress next to Yegor in a suit, shining, happy, as if there was no missing detail, no shadow behind their smiles. I looked at the photo longer than I should have. I was looking for a hint of regret that I was not there. I didn't find it. On the contrary, they looked calm. I spent the wedding day alone, not by chance, not in a fit of melancholy. Consciously, I made a big breakfast. Fried eggs, bacon, sandwiches, the whole set. I sat down at the table, poured tea, and didn't check my phone. Around midday, I went to the barn and started sanding an old rocking chair. I had been planning to restore it for about 5 years. I lost track of time, the rhythm of the work, the hum of the machine, the smell of sawdust. All of this dulled the pain better than any medicine. I didn't think about Yegor saying his vows, Marina making a toast, my family dancing and drinking while I sat in silence. I simply worked, because work is the only thing that has never betrayed me. In the evening, I grilled some meat, poured myself some cognac, sat on the veranda, and watched the sky turn from orange to purple. No one called or wrote, and the emptiness I feared did not swallow me up. It sat down next to me, quiet, respectful, like an old friend who knows when it is best to keep quiet. I thought about Galina. What would she say? If she saw all this mess, she would get angry. She always said that I give too much, asking for nothing in return. Maybe she was right. Maybe this is my main mistake, loving my family unconditionally, believing that this is enough. In the morning, I packed a wedding gift, a custom-made watch with Yegor's initials and the wedding date on the back. I was going to give it to her at the pre-wedding dinner in a cafe to mark the moment. Instead, I shoved the box into the far corner of the closet behind old photo albums and folders. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, but I knew I'd never give it to them. The moment passed, and with it, something quietly broke inside me. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with understanding. Understanding is a strange thing. It doesn't always come all at once. Sometimes it's like a slow leak in a pipe. No one notices until the floors rot. And when you finally smell the damp, the damage is already done. That's how it is with me. As if I've lived with quiet betrayal for years, and only now was I able to face the truth. How Marina stopped asking my opinion. How Yegor stopped visiting less and less. Polite but cold calls on holidays. There were signs. I just didn't want to see them. On Monday, I finally closed the deposit, went to the bank, confirmed the freeze, and they immediately gave me all the documents. I wanted everything to be clean, without omissions. When the consultant asked if I needed help with explanations for my family, I chuckled briefly and bitterly. They've already explained everything, I said. They don't want my participation. Arriving home, I felt a strange calm, not satisfaction, not revenge, but determination. That feeling when you finally stop pretending that loved ones are incapable of hurting you. I wasn't angry. I didn't suffer. I just accepted it. The days after the wedding were strange. Not painful as I expected, but empty, as if you were walking around a house from which the furniture had been taken out. Everything is in place. The photographs on the walls, the smell of old leather in the chair, the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. But something has gone beneath the surface. Not a word from Marina. No thanks. No continuation of the conversation. Not even a piece of cake. No polite call to say, everything went well, as if I had been cleaned out completely. Surgically, without a trace. I waited for the pain to grow into anger, into something loud and furious that would justify my actions. But I felt only a quiet completion, as if I had finished the last page of a book I had been writing without knowing it. I tried to live on. Every morning, I went to the diner on Main Street, where I had been drinking morning coffee with the same group of retirees for 10 years. We chatted about politics, about football, about the new development that was disfiguring the northern part of the city. Everyone was asking about the wedding. So, Andre one winked. The sky filled with tears when the grandson finished. I just smiled, took a sip of tea, and shrugged. It didn't work out to get through. A heavy silence hung in the air. No one asked questions. Several men exchanged glances. But the conversation quickly moved in another direction. They didn't ask any more. The silence at home was even more oppressive. The documents for the deposit were lying in the office in a closet, officially frozen. Not a penny without my signature. I made it clear to the bank. No transfers without my written consent. And I wasn't going to give it. A consultant from the bank, a certain Mr. Mishin, called once to double-check. Just to clarify, Mr. Mikhailovich, are you maintaining your position? He asked cautiously, as if he was afraid to offend me. I confirm that they are maintaining theirs, I answered, and that was the decision. The photos started pouring in that same week. Online albums, tags, smiling faces in hundreds of different poses. Yegor in a strict dark blue suit, his bride. Lisa in a dress that must have cost more than my first $3,000 to $1,000 mortgage. Marina, between them, beaming, with a bouquet, like Mother of the Year. I studied her face, the way I used to study blueprints. I looked for cracks, inconsistencias, weaknesses in the structure, but she looked happy. Serene. My absence didn't even cast a shadow on her face. One photo, especially, caught my attention. Yegor stands with Lisa's parents, hugging them. The caption is surrounded by a loving family. I looked at it for a long time. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe a mention, a toast in my honor, a caption under the photo. It's a pity that my grandfather is not here. At least something small. An acknowledgement that I am not just a forgotten name in a family tree, but empty. The digital world gobbled up this event and spat it out, as if he had never existed. After that, I closed the social media page. I don't need reminders of where I'm not that weekend. I opened an old cedar chest in the bedroom. I hadn't touched it for years. Inside were photographs, letters, all sorts of little things from Marina's childhood. Her first school notebook, a pencil drawing of our old house, an ironed graduation ribbon. I kept everything, every memory, every milestone. I ran my fingers over the paper, over the uneven lines of her handwriting, and felt something squeeze in my chest. I mourned not only my absence from the wedding, I grieved that all those years of love and work had turned into the kind of formal gratitude that is expressed once a year in a New Year's card. I thought about Galina. What would she say if she saw all this mess? She would get angry. There was a fire burning in her that wouldn't let injustice go unpunished. I could almost hear her voice. Don't let them walk all over you. Andri, you're important. Your presence is important. But she wasn't there, and I was tired of arguing with ghosts. I put everything back in the chest. Photos, drawings, notebooks, old school projects, and locked it. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I wasn't so hardened, but I couldn't stumble over the past anymore, as if it still belonged to the present. I needed air to understand what was next, to rebuild a version of myself that didn't revolve around a family for whom I was no longer important. On Sunday, I went to the river, about 40 miles north. There is a place where Galina, little Marina, and I used to camp. We hadn't been there for about 10 years. I took a camp chair, a thermos of tea, a notebook in a square. I sat by the water for hours, watching the sunbeams play on the waves. It was quiet, calm, that silence that does not press, but heals. I wrote a letter to Yegor, not to send, just to talk it out on paper. I wrote that I loved him, that I had always loved him. But love without respect is not love, it is a lever. And I stopped being a lever. By sunset, something had settled inside. An unclosed gestalt is a myth. But, let's be clear, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even particularly sad, I just stopped pretending. Stopped giving without counting. Stopped waiting for recognition that wouldn't come. I folded the letter, put it in a notebook, and silently went home. The party was over. I wasn't part of it, but I survived it. Alone, yes, but on my feet, and that mattered. Exactly 8 days after the wedding, the phone rang. I almost ignored it. On Monday mornings, salespeople usually call to remind me about the clinic, but something about the number seemed familiar. Dad. Marina's voice came through the receiver, thin and uncertain, as if she were checking the water temperature before jumping. I was silent. Let her stew in her own silence. She sighed sharply. I need to talk to you. Please. The tone was different. Unrehearsed. Not forced. A wit I hadn't heard in years trembled. I leaned back in my chair, still holding the mug of cold tea. Go ahead, I said, my voice as even as a concrete screed. Another pause. I didn't mean to exclude you. She blurted out. It wasn't just me. Mostly not even me. Lisa's family had concerns. They decided it was for the best. The words came out quickly, like she was running on a sled with consequences. They were afraid of the tension. You know how it is. She paused. When someone distracts, I distract. I didn't phrase it as a question. I already knew the answer. But hearing her try to put it into a noble form drove the nail deeper. Marina exhaled loudly, clearly upset that I wasn't making it easier for her. No. Dad, you're not distracting me, just so that everything goes smoothly. Weddings are delicate matters, and I finished the rough stuff for her. A complication. An inconvenience. That's not what I said. She snapped. I didn't mean for it to turn out this way. I tried to object, but Yegor said. She fell silent again, as if she realized how few cards she had. They simply decided that it would be better without the tension. I laughed. Sadly. Dryly. Brokenly. You mean it's better without me? Her voice wavered. Dad, please don't do that. Yegor didn't want to offend you. He's just young. He didn't understand how it would be for you. But now he understands. We all understand. Especially after we found out about the deposit. And here it is. The real reason for the call. Marina fell silent, waiting for an answer. I was silent. I took another sip of cold tea. Let it marinate in the silence. She continued. I didn't even know you were planning anything. Why didn't you say so? Because I wanted it to be a gift. I said slowly, weighing each word. Not a deal. Not payment for patience. A gift from a grandfather who considered himself part of the family. We were wrong, she said quickly. Big mistake. But to freeze the deposit, is that fair? This is Yegor's future? He's just starting out. Me, too. I muttered. When I married your mother, we had nothing but an old car and a couch from the dump. No handouts. No deposits. Just sweat and hope. The voice grew harsher. Do you think I did all this so Yegor would inherit without even looking at me on his wedding day, Dad? No. Let me finish. I spent years, décades, toiling, so you and Yegor would have more than me. You skip holidays for overtime. I gave up vacations to pay for your braces, your car, your education. I was on hand for any call, any request, and in return asked only for a seat at a stupid table. I heard her breathing become ragged. The weight of my words finally reached her. You have no idea what this is like. I continued, and my voice wavered. No matter how hard I tried to keep it steady. Opening the phone and seeing strangers instead of myself. Seeing your shining face next to those who barely knew Yegor. While I sat here like a ghost. I swallowed hard. Sono. Marina. I won't unfreeze the deposit. Not now. Maybe never. But, Dad, we need it. We've already put down a deposit on the apartment. We made plans. Without me. Keep making plans. She fell silent again. For a moment, all I could hear was her breathing and the ticking of the wall clock. Then she said something I didn't expect. That's it. You're just cutting us off. I looked out the window. The sun was just rising, illuminating the yard where Yegor had been kicking a ball around. No, I said. You're the one cutting us off. I'm just catching up. Her voice wavered again, but I didn't wait for her to continue. I ended the conversation, put the phone on the table, and stared at it, wondering if it would ring again. It didn't ring, and I didn't want it to. I got up and went out onto the porch. The morning air was sharp, invigorating. I slowly inhaled it, as if I could wash the remnants of the conversation out of my lungs. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel cruelty. I felt clarity. For the first time in many years, I knew exactly my place in their life. Somewhere behind convenience, behind decency, but far enough from priorities to finally stop pretending. The silence after the call was louder than any argument. Marina didn't call back. Yegor didn't get in touch. For several days, it was as if I'd dropped a stone into a well and was waiting for a splash. Nothing. No ripples. No echo. Just silence. At first, I thought they were regrouping, figuring out what to do. Then, maybe, I finally said something weighty, made them realize the gravity of what they had done. But by the end of the week, when the silence continued, I realized the truth. They no longer knew how to talk to me, except when they needed something from me. And then the letters, notifications, and messages began. The first came from some family lawyer I had never met. The hyphenated last name has probably never worn work boots in its life. The letter is not hostile, but slippery, full of phrases like preliminary agreements, verbal commitments, possible claims, more like a warning shot than a conversation. They wanted to clarify the situation with the deposit. What are the terms? Were there any prior agreements about access to the funds? Yes, or after the wedding, was my decision to freeze the account an emotional reaction or a deliberate move? I laughed when I read that line. Reaction or premeditation? As if there were only two types of decisions in the world. They didn't understand that my action was not out of anger or revenge. It was self-preservation. I was not punishing them. I was protecting myself. I didn't answer right away. I needed to think about it. Not because I doubted my decision, but because I knew things would get worse. And sure enough, a few days later, he received a long message from Yegor. It started with the usual pleasantries. Hi, Grandpa. I hope you're doing well. As if we hadn't seen each other since the vacation. But the tone quickly changed. He explained that the apartment they had put a deposit on was now under threat. The honeymoon had already been cut short. They expected input, even if I didn't say anything. They heard something, and it became part of their plans. He never really apologized for the wedding. He just wrote something like, "Sorry it hurt. Nothing personal," which is just another way of saying, we knew it would hurt. We just didn't care. I reread the message twice, then deleted it, not out of spite, but because I knew that answering it would only lead to more manipulation, more attempts to smooth things over, just enough to get what I wanted. I was no longer going to be the family ATM. I would not let my legacy become a trifle tied to their convenience. Rumors started to spread among relatives. My sister called. Her voice was cautious. "Andri, I heard there was some tension after the wedding." She felt she was fishing for information, trying to be a peacemaker. I told her briefly. They didn't invite me. I froze the deposit. There was no contact. She sighed and tried to play devil's advocate. Do you know what young people are like these days? They are fully loaded. They don't always think everything through. They thought it through enough to hire a lawyer. I answered dryly. That made her shut up. Soon after, my cousin, whom I hadn't seen for 100 years, wrote on Facebook, Hi, I'm wondering what's going on with Marina and Yegor. They look very upset. Maybe I should know something. I remained silent. What's the point? Everyone suddenly wanted details, even though they hadn't thought about me for years. Now that I had become an obstacle in someone else's story, I had captured their attention completely. One day, I was trimming the bushes in the yard. A car pulled up to the house. Marina walked out slowly in one of those designer jackets that she laughed at when we were 20. When we went to the gardening shop, she looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept properly for days. She approached cautiously, as if I were a dog that might bite. Dad, she said, we can talk? I didn't invite her in. I put the boat aside, wiped my hands off my jeans, and nodded toward the swing on the porch. We sat in silence. Then she spoke. I didn't come to argue. I came to try to fix this. I looked at her. I really did. The girl I raised was still out there somewhere, behind the years of distance, behind the calculated silence. But I no longer trusted that version. Listen, I said. She began her speech. How hard it was for Yegor. How they were caught off guard. How she never wanted it to turn out this way. But the more she talked, the more it seemed like a negotiation. She mentioned the contribution only once, but it shone through in every sentence. I felt a quiet expectation that the conversation would end with my capitulation. When she fell silent, I spoke slowly, choosing my words like bricks for masonry. I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because I needed to get something back. You made it clear that I was not the part of your life that you thought I was. That is your right. But it is also my right to respond within my boundaries. I will not finance people who only see me for my monetary value. Her eyes filled with tears. But I did not flinch. I had been biting my tongue for too long, trying too hard to maintain a peace that was never mutual. She stood up. So you're just done with us? No, I said, standing up too. Just stopping, pretending. She didn't hug me goodbye. Didn't tell me she loved me. Got in her car and drove away without looking back. And I watched her go, not with anger, not with sadness, but with a kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. My family had tested me, and for the first time in my life, I chose to defend myself. The point is that setting boundaries doesn't make the pain go away. It just gives it a place to stay. In those weeks after Marina's visit, the silence in the house didn't feel victorious. It felt honest. For the first time, I wasn't covering up pain with mercy, or stitching up rejection with generosity. Letting the wounds remain visible, not to punish someone else, but to remind myself. I matter. 2. Important, not only because I give. Important even when I am not needed. My life became more dramatic. On the contrary, the mail came. Tea was brewed every morning. The sun rose over the backyard, as always. But something shifted inside. I began to make small changes, trifles for others. But for me, a revolution. I took the wedding invitation, still sealed, the one sent after the wedding. Apparently for decency's sake, I burned it in the fire in the backyard. No anger, no ceremony. Just a quiet farewell to the version of myself that had been waiting to be invited to my own table. That person was gone. Instead of studying deposit paperwork or waiting for apologetic calls, I began spending my time differently. I signed up as a volunteer for the district veterans construction team. They were building housing for displaced people. The smell of sawdust, the weight of tools in my hands. It was like coming home. These were people forgotten by the system. They didn't ask for pity, but they appreciated the help. I came with a tool belt, helped build walls, and pour the foundation. During lunch breaks, they treated me like one of their own. No questions about weddings. No judgment. Just kiet. Respect. I also started tinkering with a motorcycle in the garage. An old Harley from the late 70s. I bought it at a salvage yard many years ago. Always intended to restore it. But life made adjustments to raise Marina, run a business, and help the family. Now that there is space in life and clarity in the heart, I am drawn to iron again. I cleaned the carburetor, overhauled the engine, ordered parts online with such anticipation as I had not felt in decades. The motorcycle became a metaphor. All the parts were in place, just waiting for attention. Care. And the right hands. Marina did not write anymore. Yegor sent another message. In short, colder. He wrote that he hoped I was doing well, that he understood my position, even if he didn't agree, that he and Lisa would sort things out themselves. No warmth. No invitation to reconciliation. Just a polite reply. Like gratitude from a person returning a gift he never needed. I didn't answer. I said what was needed. There was no point in repeating it twice. The hardest part wasn't the distance. What's harder to grasp is how little they seem to feel the weight of what happened. No remorse. No real regret. Just moving forward. As if the problem had been in me all along. But even that became a strange relief over time. Because when you stop begging for someone else's love, you start to notice the places where the real lives. You find a new rhythm to life. I cooked myself big Saturday breakfasts. Like I cooked for Marina as a child. Bacon and eggs. Pancakes. Fresh tea. I listened to old records while eating. Sometimes I took the plate out onto the veranda and ate in silence. The sound of the wind in the trees was company enough. I stopped clinging to old memories. Started creating new ones that didn't require someone else's confirmation. I even started writing little things. Letters to Galina that I would never send. Notes about working in a construction team. Thoughts about legacy. And time. Forgiveness. It was nice to put my thoughts on paper. To see them take shape. The letter helped me realize that I hadn't lost everything. I had lost the illusion. And in its place, I was building something much more durable. Peace. Earlier in the spring, I updated my will, sat in the notary's office, and looked through the documents with an ease that surprised even me. I completely rewrote the terms of the deposit. I excluded Yegor and Marina from the list of heirs, not out of malice, but for clarity. I replaced their names with a grant for vocational school students, guys who want to build with their own hands and will be grateful for the chance. I added a point in bold. An inheritance is not an apology for exclusion. It is a reward for connection, for respect, for mutual love and kindness. The notary looked at me when we finished. Are you sure? Mr. Mikhailovich. He nodded. I had never been so sure of anything, and it was true. For the first time in many years, I wasn't acting out of debt, trying to buy love or secure a place in their future. I was taking back what was mine. As summer approached, I rode my restored motorcycle onto the highway. The wind hit my face like baptism. The roar of the engine, the smell of hot asphalt, the blurred trees on the sides. I felt alive, not the person I was, quietly waiting on the sidelines for years. But the person a person becomes when they stop asking permission to be important. I don't know what Marina tells people now. Maybe that I've become embittered. Maybe that I've changed. Maybe that I can't let go of the past. But I know the truth. I haven't changed, I just stopped pretending. I didn't let go of the past. I let go of a version of the future where I'm a welcome guest at someone else's table. And now there is silence in my life. And I can finally breathe deeply. Story 2. My stepdaughter invited me to dinner at a fancy restaurant. When I got there, they didn't have a single seat reserved for me. Chloe chuckled and said, "Places like this aren't for people like you. Maybe you could wait outside." Everyone in the room burst out laughing, including my wife. What happened next was unexpected. I'll tell you everything in order. First of all, I want to thank everyone for their constant support. It means a lot to me. If you like the stories we share here, please subscribe to the channel. It would be great if you left a comment. Write what city or country you are from. Perhaps we will mention you in one of the next episodes. We are glad that you like our story. And now let's move on to the story itself. My name is Raymond Hold. I have never liked to attract unnecessary attention to myself. Not at business meetings. Not at family celebrations. Not at the dinner table. I have made my fortune without unnecessary noise. Real estate. Quiet partnerships and one special gym that few people knew about. And another prestigious restaurant. Hidden in the heart of the city. No one knew I owned it. Not even my wife, Jenna, who was used to luxury, never wondering where the money came from, and especially not her daughter, Chloe, who looked down on me as if I were an inconvenient guest in their household. I let them think I was just lucky enough to invest in a couple of successful startups. Allowing people to underestimate me had become a habit, but that didn't mean I enjoyed it. Jenna was 20 years younger than me and had never hidden the fact that our relationship was largely based on material gain. At first, I thought I was okay with that. She brought energy and novelty to my routine, and I hoped that, over time, I could find my place in her world. But as the years went by, the little jabs became more and more noticeable. She would interrupt me at dinners, make jokes about my old-fashioned shoes in front of friends, and greet my words with a condescending smile if the topic seemed insignificant to her. Chloe had inherited not only her mother's arrogance, but also a manner of communication that was completely devoid of delicacy. Since she was 23, she had treated me like an unnecessary obstacle to be ignored or ridiculed. Depending on the situation, I had tolerated it for too long, telling myself, "You're making their life easy. Maybe someday they'll appreciate it." And then, when Chloe invited me to dinner, I didn't even know what to think. That morning she came down the stairs in a formal jacket, on expensive heels that I paid for, and casually dropped, "I made reservations for us." "You?" "Me and Mom at Vantel. It's a new restaurant. I'd like us to celebrate something." Her voice was sweet to the point of cloying, and that immediately put me on my guard. Chloe never took the initiative to spend time with me. She rarely even acknowledged my existence unless she needed to get something. But Jenna, leaning on the kitchen counter, added with the same tight smile, "It would be good for everyone to meet. You work so hard. I should trust my instincts then." A voice inside me, one I'd spent years silencing for the sake of peace, was whispering that something was wrong. But I didn't listen. I convinced myself that maybe this was the beginning of something new, that Chloe had decided to change. I even allowed myself a little hope. That evening, I spent an hour choosing a suit that would fit, not flashy, but impeccably clean and classic. I ordered a car, modest but stylish. As I drove through the evening city, I looked at the twinkling lights and thought suddenly, for the first time, I am being invited not as a source of money, but as members of the family. Vantel was a truly chic place, even by my standards. Strict black awnings, frosted glass, A golden letter B on the door. I knew every corner there. Personally approved the design of the tiles in the lobby and insisted on handmade leather chairs. It was all my baby. Every smile from the waiter, every dish on the menu, even the aromas from the kitchen. It was all mine. But that night, I decided to stay in the shadows. I approached the reception desk like a regular customer. A table on Holto, I said evenly. The receptionist frowned and looked at the screen. We don't have a reservation for that name. Are you sure you had a reservation for today? I hesitated, feeling confused. Try the name Clodison. I'm her guest. The girl checked something again. Shook her head. Sorry. Still can't find it. At that moment, I saw them. Chloe, Jenna, and 3 others. Her 2 glossy, perfect Instagram friends, and the guy with the massive rocks watch, who seemed to be practicing his smirk in the mirror. They were already sitting at the table, drinks in their hands. Clue met my gaze, and her smile grew even wider, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Oh, she said loudly enough for everyone around to hear. Look who finally came. Honestly, I didn't think you'd dare. I came closer, still hoping, although it was naive, that it would all be explained by some mistake. Maybe a misspelled name, a misunderstanding. But when I got to their table, Chloe leaned back in her chair, still holding her wine glass, and said, This place is no place for people like you. Maybe you should wait outside for us. There was a roar of laughter around the table. Even Jenna, my wife, she didn't laugh out loud. She just looked down into her wine glass. The corners of her lips turned up, as if it was a joke that shouldn't be interrupted. Such laughter hurts more than any insult. I stood there, as if naked before everyone, and for the first time in many years I felt that old, burning feeling in my chest. The same thing that reminded me of every time I allowed myself to be humiliated for the sake of peace in the family. For so many years I had bought silence, comfort, ostentatious affection. And for what? But I did not show it. I smiled. And it wasn't the smile that meant everything was okay. This time I smiled differently. The game was on. I stepped back, pulled out my phone, and made just one call. As I walked away from their table, their laughter clinking against the glass like change thrown to a beggar, I put the phone to my ear and waited for the connection. My voice was calm, even although a hurricane was raging inside. Daniil, I'm in the anteroom now. Let the manager come out to me. I hung up without waiting for an answer. There was no need. I personally selected, screened, and trained every employee in this restaurant to my standards. I knew the manager would be at the entrance in less than a minute, and I had a pretty good idea of what would happen next. Still, my hands were shaking slightly as I put the phone back in my pocket. Not from fear, but from burning humiliation. It would seem that with my money and position, I shouldn't pay attention to the antics of a spoiled girl and her fake friends. But the shame of not asking how much you have in your account, it hits like a punch in the stomach. It wasn't just Chloe's words, but how she said them in the smirk, in the tilt of her head, in the contempt, in the voice, in the certainty that I would not answer. As always, I would fade into the shadows, and they would have fun at my expense. This one really hurt. Jenna didn't even look my way when all this was happening. This is what really squeezed my chest. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of caring, protecting, compromising, and then she couldn't look up when her daughter literally spat in my face. Even if figuratively, all her devotion was not to me, but to the level of comfort I provided. That evening, everything became clearer. Clearer. The illusion of love I had held onto for decades crumbled to dust like crystal under a hammer. I was not family, but an accessory, a purse on two legs. Mister, hold. The voice tore me from my thoughts like a ray of sunshine breaking through clouds. I turned to see Jameson, the manager, striding toward me. His eyes were worried. He quickly smoothed his jacket. I'm sorry. See ya. We didn't know. Everything is fine, I said, adjusting my lapels. Is table number 1 available? Of course. Jameson responded without hesitation and snapped his fingers. 2 employees immediately took down the reserved sign and began setting the table as if it were being prepared for VIPs. At that moment, all the noise in the room seemed to stop. I walked past the receptionist, who now clearly wanted to disappear into the ground. The laughter at Chloe's table stopped instantly. I didn't have to turn around to know. Everyone was watching me. There was tension in the air. Their confusion. Then realization. Then confusion. They weren't used to being singled out. Especially me. I took a seat at the most expensive and visible table in the room and called Jameson over again. And one more thing, I said quietly. Call security. I want that group escorted out of the restaurant. Jameson hesitated for just a split second, glancing toward Chloe and her guests, but then nodded. We'll be done. The room was almost dead silent when 2 uniformed employees emerged from the back. They confidently approached Chloe's table. At first, confusion appeared on her face. Then, obvious indignation. What the hell is this? Excuse me, madam, one of the guards said calmly, but by order of the owner. You are asked to leave the restaurant? Ooh, and a jaw dropped. Owner, what's this? A joke, she rolled her eyes. My stepfather can't afford a restaurant like this. He could hardly handle the wine here. And then everything changed. Jameson stepped forward and, for everyone in the room to hear, said loudly, Actually, Madam, Mr. Holt, owner of Vantel, for 3 years. You leave the restaurant at his request. The room went dead silent. Chloe stood up so abruptly that her chair fell on the poi. You can't. Seriously, she cried, her eyes darting between Jenna and the staff. Her cheeks were burning not only with anger but also with shame. Jenna rose slowly, shocked, barely able to find words. Raymond, she whispered, her voice shaking. We didn't know. That's it, I said, taking a slow sip of wine. That's the problem. There were tears in her eyes. Real or not. I didn't know anymore. Maybe we should talk. Please. I nodded slightly to the guards. They're interrupting my dinner. Make sure this company immediately pokes fun at this fight. One of the staff members opened the door while security tactfully but confidently escorted them to the exit. Chloe was screaming obscenities. One of her friends tried to film the whole thing on her phone, but the waiter politely reminded her that filming was prohibited on private property. And Jenna kept looking back at me like a dog left outside the door of a house that was once hers. But I didn't move, didn't flinch. I just sat there, enjoying the wine I'd chosen for the restaurant's wine list. As the doors closed behind them, I felt nothing. No triumph. No revenge. Only emptiness. That was until Jenna returned about 20 minutes later. She wasn't allowed in, of course, but I saw her bending over at the front desk, begging for something. The girl pointed nervously at Jameson, who came out to Jenna at the door and whispered something to her. I didn't hear that. Then he came back to me. She wants to talk to you, Jameson said quietly. I took another sip of wine, then carefully set the glass down. Let her talk to my lawyer. Jameson nodded and left. I was left alone at the most expensive table in my own restaurant, surrounded by crystal and candles. and I realized something I should have accepted long ago. I had never been part of their family. I had simply sponsored their show. But now the curtain had fallen. I woke up in the morning to an empty bed. Jenna had never come home. The pillows still had the faint scent of her perfume, but the sheets on Jenna's side were smooth, untouched from the night before. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, not out of sadness, but rather out of calculation. The memories of the previous evening swirled in my head, not like a blurry film, but like a series of bright, clear frames. The grins, and the clank of her heels as she ran away, the silence that fell over the restaurant after the truth was revealed. For a decade I had paid for their contempt. I had bought silence with concessions, and only yesterday had I stopped writing them new checks. The phone vibrated on the nightstand. A message from Janae. Just 3 words. "We need to talk." I didn't answer, at least not right away. I was in no hurry. I made coffee, walked around the lot, opened the window, letting in the July air. Everything around me seemed the same, but something inside me had changed. As if for the first time in a long time I had stepped out of a role no one had invited me to play. The silence in the house was unusual, unfamiliar to me, but this silence seemed like a real relief, almost a peace I had not known for many years. I sat on the terrace with my laptop, answered emails, scheduled a business meeting for lunch, and only at noon, when I opened the front door, Jenna's car drove into the yard. She got out cautiously. 2, dressed up for a casual conversation. It always meant she was going to put on a show. She was wearing white. She wore white when she wanted to appear innocent. I didn't know. She blurted as she walked up the steps. "Raymond, please believe me. I didn't know this was your restaurant. Neither did Chloe." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Is that what you're worried about? About embarrassing the wrong person?" Her face faltered. "No, that's not what I meant." "Yes." It was a cruel joke, but I didn't know it was your restaurant. If I had, I would have respected it. I interrupted, without changing my tone. Would she have defended me, or just told her to make a different joke? She looked away. "Ray, come on. You're twisting everything." "No," I answered calmly, for the first time in years. "I'm not twisting anything, but finally putting everything in its place." Jenna's eyes lit up. She was about to cry. "Please don't ruin everything over one mistake." "One mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "Jenna, this isn't about the restaurant. This is about all the times you made me feel like a stranger in my own home. All the times you let your daughter treat me like trash while I paid for her school, her rent, her salon. And last night, it's not an accident. It's the result." She stepped towards me, touched my hand. "Don't do this. We can fix this." I looked at her hand, and she pulled it away. "Why should I fix something that wasn't there?" I asked. "You didn't love me. You only loved the life I provided for you." She shook her head, but I didn't wait for an excuse. I stepped aside and motioned her into the house. "If you want to pack your things, do it now. The lawyers have already prepared all the paperwork." Her jaw dropped. "Are you kicking me out?" "No," I said. "I'm closing the deal. You're free to find someone you can truly respect." Jenna left without a word. By evening, her name was gone from all of our joint accounts. My legal team, as always, worked quickly. The divorce petition was already filed. Later, Jenna would learn that the very prenup she had skimmed through 10 years ago, too busy with her new car and her European honeymoon, would now provide her with exactly what she had come into our marriage with: a wardrobe of designer clothes and a few credit cards. But the consequences didn't stop there. Rumors about what happened in Antel spread quickly. I didn't count on it, but perhaps I should have predicted it. Some local influencer was sitting at the next table and, recognizing Chloe, described the whole scandal in her story. Without photos, just a detailed retelling. How a rich girl's stepfather turned out to be a restaurant owner and threw the entire company out the door like trash. It all went viral. Users tagged Gloria until she closed her profiles. 2 days later, the assistant forwarded me a voice message. Raymond. Jenna's voice was shaking. I can't believe you're doing this. I know you were angry. But to leave me empty-handed after 10 years of marriage, do you really hate me that much? I didn't answer. Not out of hatred, but because for the first time in years I had chosen myself and stopped encouraging betrayal. A week passed, then another. The house became quiet. There was no more loud music from the wing of the Chloe. No more forced smiles over silent dinners. No more sly jabs disguised as irony. It was just me, the ticking of the clock, and an unexpected relief. One evening I went to Ante for dinner, not to sweep away Vantel, but to remember what real silence tastes like. Jameson greeted me with genuine warmth, without pretense. The entire staff moved with a clear, calm coherence. The same table where I had sat on that unforgettable night was set and waiting for me. About halfway through dinner, a middle-aged couple approached me. Are you the man from history? The woman asked, amused admiration in her eyes. The one who turned everything around. I nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. You're a legend. The husband added. Respect, I smiled politely. As they left, something cold dawned on me. I became a warning not for people like me, but for people like Jenna and Chloe, and I felt no pity at all. Because sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to burn it to the ground. Soon, the consequences of the scandal became public, no longer just whispers and hints on social media. Everything turned into a real information fire. The influencer's voice spread across various platforms. It was discussed in blogs, on podcasts. Even the local news featured a story with the headline, Secret Billionaire Taught a Lesson to a Spoiled Stepdaughter. I myself did not seek to glaze over. I did not even confirm the story. But the internet did not wait for my permission. The original post didn't have her name, but Chloe's did. And when people started recognizing her, when former classmates confirmed her reputation, it was over. By the end of the week, Chloe had lost her PR internship. Fitness partners had removed her ad codes, even her favorite cafe, where she filmed her stories, asked her not to come back, for the sake of the peace of the establishment. In an instant, her golden girl mask fell. I wasn't happy about her fall, and I was surprised myself. I thought I would feel satisfaction, even delight, but instead I felt something else. Heavy, lingering sadness, like watching a man fall on the road you built for him, and realizing he never learned to walk on his own. Chloe grew up in wealth not because she earned it, but because I provided it, and by caring for her, I only gave her the right to impunity time and time again. I rented her an apartment when she lost yet another job. I bought her silence when she yelled at Jenna. I pretended not to hear the taunts about my age. Maybe it wasn't just her fault. Maybe it was mine. 2. One evening, an old friend of mine, Marcus, came to see me. We had known each other since university, before money, before marriage. When we were two poor guys discussing business plans over cheap beer, he had always been straightforward, and I appreciated that. Are you okay? He asked, sitting down in the chair opposite. You look like someone just gave you a shower. You look so clean. I chuckled. But there are a few. I saw that post, he added, sipping his scotch. You really put them out there for everyone to see. I nodded. He whistled. You're something, not too much. I was thinking more to myself. What if it is? Marcus shook his head. You've forgiven more than I've ever seen anyone tolerate. You didn't lose your temper. You just set a boundary. Finally, he paused, then added, and if you're asking out of guilt, that's a good sign. It means you're not like them. I thought about those words for a long time. I didn't want to become bitter. That was my fear. To become one of those rich men who become cynical, withdrawn, indifferent. I didn't want that. I wanted to feel again, to trust again, but only those who deserved it. The house seemed bigger now, to emptier. Jenna came back for her things again. Didn't cry. Didn't say a word. Moved quickly, like a shadow that no longer belonged in this house. I didn't stop her. I watched from the office window as Jenna drove away. The trunk was filled with designer suitcases. That was all she had. 3 days later, she officially filed for divorce. I signed the papers that day and sent them back with a short note. No arguments. No payments. There was no response from her. But her lawyer tried to revise the prenuptial agreement. In vain. My lawyer quickly shut down any attempts. In the days that followed, I began doing things I hadn't allowed myself to do in years. Hosting dinners. Not parties. En boutquier. Intimate gatherings. Old friends. A few trusted business associates. Even a neighbor I'd barely interacted with before. We ate good food. Shared stories. Laughed. For the first time, no one was coming to me for profit. Everyone was there because they wanted to be there. And when the guests left, I didn't feel tired or empty. Instead, I felt seen and alive. Suddenly, a text came from Chloe. Short. I've lost everything. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time, not knowing what to say, or if I should answer at all. She was still young, not yet ossified, maybe capable of change. But what awaits me if I open the door again? More manipulation. More ridicule. Until the storm comes again, I never responded. But I didn't block it either. That evening, I went out for a walk around the block. The air was thick with summer heat, and the moon hung heavy. I thought about family, not the kind you're adopted into or inherited, but the kind you create yourself. I haven't had one yet, but maybe the space I've cleared can finally be filled with something real. The next morning, Jameson called. There's a woman outside the restaurant who insists you come out to her. Refuses to leave. Who Jenna? Isaihed. What does she want? She says she wants one last conversation. I thought about it and after a short pause said, tell her I'm busy. And it was true. I was busy putting myself back together, which I had ignored for so long. 2 months passed. The weather changed. It became cooler and easier to breathe. The harshness of summer was replaced by the soft breath of autumn. That very silence appeared that makes you think. I stopped going on social networks, even through an assistant. The story faded, as it always does with viral scandals. New dramas, new betrayals arrived. Chloe disappeared from my sight. Yenna stopped calling. I assumed the divorce was final, but I didn't even bother to ask. The silence should have been a relief, but it echoed. The house felt so empty that no amount of square footage could hide it. I walked through rooms I hadn't been in for years. Opened drawers. Touched old books. Sat on chairs that were just decoration. In this silence, I finally heard what was destroyed in life and what remained whole. I wasn't truly alone. There were voices. Old friends. Even new acquaintances who sometimes dropped by the restaurant. But I missed those little things. The steps into the kitchen at night. Someone getting drunk with a bad playlist, arguing about nothing. I missed the feeling of being truly known, and maybe that was what scared me the most. That after all that, I still wanted it. I didn't tell anyone when I decided to rent out the guest house. It wasn't for the money. I just wanted to hear the sounds of light footsteps outside the office. Water in the bathroom, somewhere nearby. I carefully selected tenants, not by income, but by energy. I didn't want to see an actor in my life again. I wanted sincerity, even if not clumsy. That's how I met Harper. Censure Wu, a freelance editor fresh out of divorce who preferred to keep to herself. She came to the audition in jeans, with a hole in the knees and a shabby bag. "I'm bad at interviews," she said right away. "I pay on time. I don't have noisy parties. And I can cook great horns." I liked her right away. There was not a drop of falsehood in her. Not a hint of feigned charm. Just a woman who had been through a lot and didn't try to hide it. A week later, Harper moved in and was indeed distant. But she always said hello. Always asked how things were. Sometimes brought extra food. One evening, I accepted an invitation. We sat on the small veranda outside the guest house, drinking wine, while cicadas chirped behind us. She told me about her ex-husband, an artist who cheated more often than he painted, and how she had decided to start over. I told her about Jenny, about Chloe, about that night at the restaurant. Though I smoothed over the rough edges, I didn't need to impress her. And she wasn't expecting a show. She actually told you that Harper asked, raising an eyebrow. Waiting outside, I nodded. And my wife laughed as if nothing had happened. She shook her head, clearly shaken. You never thought you held on to her simply because deep down you believed you deserved it. That hit the nail on the head. I didn't answer right away. I took a sip of wine, stared into the darkness. Maybe I finally confessed. Or maybe I was just afraid to be alone. Same thing, she said softly. There was no flirting between us. At least not yet. Just mutual understanding. And after months of gossip and judgment and emotional isolation, it was worth it more than any feeling. Harper didn't tell me I was right. She didn't scold Jenna. She just listened. And it was a revelation. A few days later, I got a letter from Chloe. I know I've been terrible. I don't deserve anything. But I'm scared. I've never really worked. I don't know how to live now. I thought my mom had a plan. But she's broke too. I'm sorry. There was no manipulation in her words. Only fatigue. Panic. A collision with reality. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry. Not embittered. Just confused. I was no longer the same person who came to the restaurant 3 months ago. I didn't want revenge. And I didn't want reconciliation either. For the first time, I just wanted to be clear with myself. I forwarded the email to an HR contact at one of my friend's companies with a short note. Consider her for an entry-level position. She'll need training. Don't make concessions. Don't hire based on connections. Just a chance to grow. I didn't respond to Chloe, and didn't plan to. But I didn't delete her email either. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept for 8 hours straight. No dreams. No worries. Just calm. When the first autumn rains passed through the city, I had already fully entered the new rhythm of life. The foliage near the restaurant gradually began to turn soft amber shades, such that the city landscape resembles a painting before sunset. Things were going well. Even better. Jameson had updated the menu for the fall, and our wine lists for the new season were getting mentions in magazines I hadn't noticed before. Now I noticed everything. After a decade of living in an emotional fog, clarity was the greatest luxury I had ever had. One October evening, I stood on the balcony above Vantel's main dining room, watching the staff work as smoothly and precisely as a clock. That evening we were hosting a quiet charity dinner. No red carpet. No celebrity chefs. Just good food. Decent people. And real stories. The evening was in aid of career guidance programs for young people from disadvantaged families. Harper also came not as a couple, but simply as a friend. She helped at the entrance, sometimes throwing me an approving gesture from across the room. We didn't name anything, didn't define the relationship, and for the first time that was enough for me. In the middle of the evening, Jameson came up with a tired face. At the entrance, "Someone insists on talking to you. Says urgent." "Who, Chloe?" The name fell like a heavy stone in my stomach. I thought I was ready for this moment. I ran through all the possible scenarios in my head requests. Arguments. Apologies. But still, when I heard her name out loud, the past washed over me like a wave. I took a deep breath and nodded. Take her to a private room. Chloe had changed. Not in the way you change your hair or clothes, but in her posture. The previous carelessness had left her shoulders. Now she held herself modestly, even hunched over, like a person who had been brought down to earth by life. Her voice was quieter than usual. "Thank you for seeing me." I nodded toward the chair, but remained standing. "You have 5 minutes." She blinked, nodded quickly. "Good." She opened her bag and pulled out a crumpled envelope. "I wanted you to know that I got a job, the one you basically planted for me. I go every day without any concessions. It's hard sometimes, but it's real." I kept quiet. "I don't expect anything from you anyway." She continued, "And I understand that I deserved everything that happened. But I wanted to leave you something." She moved the envelope towards me. Inside was a letter, handwritten by her. Dozens of pages. I didn't read it right away, and there was no need. Everything was already written in her face. Regret, but also effort. I nodded. "Are you holding on? I'm trying." Chloe didn't answer right away. She even went to a therapist. This is new for me. I looked closely at her. Somewhere I could see the features of the old girl who stomped around the house and demanded money. But there was another one. Real. Vulnerable. "I hope you won't leave." I said, "I won't leave." She was about to leave, but stopped. "I don't want to be the same. I want to achieve something myself." I didn't answer, and she didn't need to. When she left, I returned to the balcony and looked at the hall. My name was not on the sign or on the menu, but my participation was felt in everything, in the details, in the taste, in that silence where others would scream ego. I've never been a person who puts on display. I've been a person who builds for eternity, and that's what meant more to me today than any revenge or viral scandal. As the guests began to leave, Harper came up to me. "All good?" "Yes." "Even better." She smiled. "You'll read the letter in time." We barely spoke anymore. Just stood there, watching the waiters clear the last tables and wipe down the countertops. The evening was drawing to a close. All the bills were paid, and this perhaps not at someone else's expense. I left the restaurant no longer a man who had won something, but a man who had finally stopped losing. If this story resonated with you, think about it. How often do we keep silent for the sake of peace and lose ourselves? Write in the comments when you have said enough. Like, subscribe, and share this video if you think it's important to stand up for your worth, even when your family forgets who you are. See you soon. Yeah.